Joining me on the telecast right now is former Lieutenant Governor Najeeb Jung. Thank you, sir, for joining me. And my first question, if you could help us understand why and how was the erstwhile Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College converted into Aligarh Muslim University in 1920 under the Act of Parliament?
Mika, it has a long history. It was in the late 19th century when Sir Syed realized that the Muslim community was backward educationally. They were resorting to teachings only in madrasas, and there was a need for modern education. So along with a few colleagues, albeit all of them Muslims, they thought that they'd create a university town on the image of Oxford and Cambridge. And so Sir Syed Ahmad traveled to Oxford and Cambridge and came back. The first step was the creation of a small college. That was the Anglo-Mohammedan College. And over time, they realized that one college is not enough, and therefore they needed a university. A group of, again, Muslims traveled around the country, contacted the Rajas, Maharajas, Zamindars, businessmen, including, by the way, Gandhiji, and decided that they would open a university, and that is how the university came into being. It got a minority tag because it was the Muslims who started it. It was the Muslims who were in the academic council. Mm-hmm. However, it's a misconception that admissions to the AMU are limited to Muslims, or it's in a vast majority of Muslims. The AMU is a pretty secular university over the years, with a large number of non-Muslims, particularly in engineering and medicine and architecture and so on. It's a great institution, and it is mostly residential along the lines of the European universities.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. And also talking about your reaction, how did you react to the Supreme Court verdict today, which overruled the 1967 Supreme Court order that refused to give Aligarh Muslim University the status of a minority university?
Megha, I think today's judgment is an incomplete judgment. I don't want to use the words, it's a flawed judgment, but it's certainly an incomplete judgment. To set aside Aziz Bashaw's case, of course, that was a completely flawed judgment, and I'm glad that it has been set aside. It was an absurd judgment. However, today's judgment is incomplete in the sense that there have been detailed arguments on the history of AMU, on the 1951 legislation, on the 1967 judgment, then the 1981 change by the UPA government. So there have been detailed arguments. So I don't see why the Supreme Court should, sort of offer a lollipop to the community and then say that you can't eat it. This has been pending for far too long. It was a seven judges bench. I fail to understand how 3 judges will sit and decide what 7 judges could not.
Okay.
So there's no point in hiding behind law or constitution. The act is very clear. The constitution is very clear. Article 30 is very clear that minorities, whether it's linguistic or religious, can run their institutions. So the Supreme Court should have acted today in a positive manner and given succor and hope to the Muslim community, which actually feels quite beleaguered.
Okay. Right. Talking about implementation of 50% reservation for the Muslim minorities, this happened 3 decades later in 1950 in Aligarh Muslim University. Why was there a need, as per the administration, to provide quota, and why did they decide that it was after 3 decades that this quota is going to be provided?
Your voice is getting a little muddled. I'm not hearing very clearly, but I think you are asking why there are 50% reservations.
Why there are 50% reservation, and particularly why did it take 3 decades for the administration of the Aligarh Muslim University to then make a decision that yes, quota needs to be provided to the Muslim minorities in the university?
Well, I'll tell you, there is a concept of affirmative action for minorities and weaker sections. Now, this was debated ad nauseum by the Constituent Assembly, which decided that there will be Article 30 in the Constitution that will give minorities some relief. And under that, it is under that the AMU and the Jamia and such institutions provide reservations. So there is no debate on this. There are hundreds of colleges and universities in India that provide reservations for others. So giving reservations to Muslims or Christians in St. Stephen's College or Delhi University or Jamia or Aligarh, it makes no difference. In fact, it shows the large-heartedness of governments that we believe in affirmative action and we believe in hand-holding of minorities, whether it is the Sikhs, whether it is Christians or Muslims or Buddhists or whatever. It is a system that is prevalent in all mature democracies of the world, and affirmative action is an accepted concept.
Right. Okay, let's go back in history and move forward from 1920 to 1950, and then the 1967 verdict came, but it was in 1981 where the Amendment Act of the Aligarh Muslim University, which was the Indira Gandhi government, it helped in restoring the minority status of the university by bringing about the Amendment Act. Now, how did this benefit the Muslim students?
No, the reason is very, very obvious. The Aziz Basha judgment was a flawed judgment. It destroyed the basic character of Aligarh Muslim University. That had to be set aside. And the government of the day understood that this is a gesture of affirmative action, that the university has been set up. You know, let me put you a very simple question. Walk on the streets of Aligarh and ask anybody, is AMU a minority institution or not? You will get the answer. Walk the streets of London and ask anybody, is AMU established by Muslims? Is it run by Muslims? Is it in the interest of Muslims? You will get your answer. And that is exactly what in 1981 the government of the day demonstrated.
Do you also think that all education institutions, whether they are run by minority communities, whether they are being provided financial support, whether they are deemed central universities by the government, should they be allowed to make their own decisions on how to implement quotas?
Look, Megha, this is the whole point of Article 30, that it allows minorities to set up their institutions and to run them. Now, it is absolutely a positive step by governments to fund them, because this is what is affirmative action, that you want to help weaker communities stand on their own feet, and this is exactly what is being done.
Do you also think that the 2006 Allahabad High Court judgment, which you spoke about, it did not grant minority status to Aligarh Muslim University? It ended up disregarding the Amendment Act of 1981. Was it wrong? And why has it taken it this long in 2024 for the verdict to be overruled?
Well, it has been proved wrong. The Supreme Court of India has held it is wrong. So who am I to comment on it? I am going a step further. I am saying that the Supreme Court should have gone a step further, that rather than just setting aside those orders, which are absurd orders to my mind, the Supreme Court should have clarified further and said, and set the question forever to bed, that these are universities that have been set up by minorities. They are in consonance with Article 30 of the Constitution, and therefore, whether it is Aligarh, whether it is the Jamia Millia Islamia, they should be considered minority institutions for good.
Talking about Jamia Millia Islamia, and again it was in 2011 where the minority university status was granted. Do you think the move came a little too late, and do you think there are other minority universities, Muslim minority universities, that should follow suit in being allowed to make their own decisions and set up their administration, rules and regulations in providing quotas?
No, this is extension of the same argument, Megha. If a institution has been set up by a community with the intention of furthering their educational interests, then of course they will continue to run it and they should be declared minority institutions. There is nothing wrong with that. Like I said, please understand the concept of affirmative action, that every responsible government in the world follows these principles. It's only a gesture to a weak minority. That is all.
Okay, my last question to you, speaking about affirmative action, how must the governments and educational institutions come together to make decisions about affirmative action? How much of the affirmative action needs to be given to the minorities and the underprivileged, and up until what time should it be carried forward? Can there be systems set up that you gauge the prosperity and development of a minority community, whether it's Christian or Muslims or any other community, and then decide amongst themselves that this is the right time to reduce that quota or this is the right time to further increase it?
No, that is a hypothetical question, I'm afraid. You can never come to a conclusion that when is it time to end quotas, when is it time to end affirmative action. There are countries in the world which do not need affirmative action because they are developed and well off. The time will come and the communities will themselves come forward. Right now, this is not the time to discuss that.
Okay, all right. On that note, thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor, for joining me on the telecast and sharing your views on the subject.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.